Hey everybody, Doug Rucker here with DougRuckerStore.com and DougRuckerSchool.com. Hey, it's raining today, Saturday, so let's go in and I'll make a video about plumbing pressure washers. Had a lot of questions about that. Been selling a ton of pressure washers here lately. So helping a lot of guys out getting their units plumbed up. So I just thought I'd make a quick video and go over that coming up next. Good guys, so I said at the beginning we're going to talk about the plumbing. It's raining, so actually I'm waiting on a guy who's taking delivery of a pressure washer today, and I'm going to be helping him by video coaching, getting his set up. That's something that I do offer. But anyway, we'll talk a little bit more about these portable units because I've been selling a lot of these to guys that are just getting started out. This is the 4 gallon per minute 3500 psi hurricane pressure washer. It's portable, that I recommend to anyone that's starting out in the business. This is like the minimum that I recommend that you buy. Anything below 4 gallon per minute, you can get started with those, but I just don't recommend them. Just takes longer. They spray water like any other pressure washer, but most of the machines that are below 4 gallon per minute just are not made for the day-to-day use and grind that we put machines through. So it's nothing personal against those machines. I just don't think they're a perfect fit for starting a business. But hey, if you're on a limited budget, you got to do what you got to do to get started. And so if it works for you, that's awesome. But anyway, this is the 4 gallon per minute, like I said, 3500 psi. And so when it comes to you, it comes basically like this. You've got a handle that you have to put on so that you can port it around a property. Great machine, Honda GX 390, and then it's got the general pump TSS 1511 pump on it. But when you get started, there's a couple things that you need to know. Your initial hookup is going to be to hook this up to a garden hose like this, and then you're going to have your pressure hose coming off of the unloader like that. And I've talked about this in a previous video, and I'll put that in the card up above in case you want to see it. But most manufacturers, when they ship them, they're going to have the coupler here as what I call the lead fitting. So that's the fitting that's coming off of the unloader, and so you would have to plug your coupler into that, and then everything down the line you're going to have the coupler as the lead fitting on your hoses. And so the bottom of your gun would need to have a plug fitting. Anything that you're going to plug in after the machine, after your lead fitting, is going to have to start with or connect into here with the plug end of the fitting. I do mine the opposite because I was just taught that the plug points the way of the water, and so I remove this and put a plug on. So then what happens is I put everything, I put the coupler in there, and then everything hooks into the plug fitting down the way. Now, that's a personal preference thing, really. I don't think it really makes a whole lot of difference mechanically wise or performance wise or anything like that. It's just the way I was taught, the way I've done it for over 30 years, and I ain't going to change. But I know a lot of guys that do it with the coupler coming off of this, and I'll show you one of the reasons here in a little bit. I'll show you some other reasons why I do it the way I do it, and I'll show you a couple of reasons why guys do it this way. But anyway, once you have your garden hose hooked up, and then you hook up your pressure hose, you turn your water on, and what's going to happen is the water comes through here and goes into the pump, and then the pump pumps it, and it comes out through the unloader. The unloader is what regulates the pressure for the machine. This one is set at 3,500. Most unloaders, or just about every unloader on a machine, is already factory set You don't need to do anything to it. You never really need to touch it unless it goes bad and you need to replace it. The only time, if you want to lower the PSI of your machine, you can do that through nozzles and lower pressure nozzles, lower volume nozzles, whatever, that will reduce the pressure on it. As a matter of fact, that's what you have to do in order to make a downstream injector work, is you've got to lower the PSI of the machine in order for a downstream injector to work. But anyway, so what happens on this machine, because you've got the water that comes in and you see this hose that loops around and comes back up to the unloader. So what happens is when you pull the trigger and call for water, the water is going through here and it's going through the pump back out here to your hose and you're spraying. When you let off the trigger, the water doesn't go through the pump, it goes through this loop and it just kind of keeps looping. And what will happen is, if you don't pull the trigger within, say, 20 to 30 seconds, that water can heat up and it can cause damage to the pump. So that's you'll hear a phrase often, you've got to stay on the gun. And so what happens is, we will, if you're hooked to a buffer tank, you can take this and make this bypass. So you would come off the unloader here and hook a hose, and I'm going to show you that in a little bit. You would hook a hose to a 90, or not a 90, but a hose barb here, and then you would run a hose out to your buffer tank, your water tank, the same tank that's would be feeding the machine. Because if you're going to hook a bypass up to it, then you might as well be feeding, you need to be feeding off of a buffer tank. So that allows the water to continually recirculate. What has to happen though is, if you're going to do that, you have to replace this part and put in a hose barb and hook your hose directly from your water tank. And now you could, if you wanted to, plug this fitting right here. When you take this hose off, you could plug that and still use a garden hose to run from your tank. But this part up here is where the bypass goes off of the unloader. So when the water comes, you let off the trigger and the water circulates, it's going back up to the tank, and it just continues to recycle the water. Pumps it through, pumps it out, pumps it through, pumps it out, that kind of thing. Now, one more important thing here is over here. Let me move my little camera. Hopefully you can see that. But this part right here, that's called a thermal relief valve. I'm going to check my camera to make sure it's right here. See that little 90 pointing down? So that's called a thermal relief valve. And so when your machine is set like it is, where it's not bypassing, what happens is, if you don't release the trigger gun to let water out every 20-30 seconds or so, the water can heat up inside the hose there and the pump and all. And so when that water gets to a certain temperature, like 130 degrees, 140, depending on what that relief valve is set at, then it's going to shoot water out. And what it's doing is relieving the pressure and releasing water. So when you see that happen, there's can be a couple things. Sometimes these will reset, sometimes they don't. I mean, sometimes you end up damaging it, so you have to replace it. So it's always a good idea to have an extra thermal relief valve, just in case you ever need it. If you needed to in a pinch, you could always just plug that hole and keep continuing on working. So again, that's a thermal relief valve. Great thing to have just an extra one, or at least a plug. That's a 1/2 inch hole there, I believe. And so if you had a plug, you could also just plug it. But that's the purpose of that little valve there. Sometimes, well, not sometimes, but if the water gets heated up too much because you didn't release the trigger to let water out, then you're going to either see that spitting water, but most of the times it's a straight stream. And so the best thing to do is just turn the machine off, release the pressure, let it sit for a little bit, 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on how hot it is out there. so everything can kind of cool back down. Start it back up. If you continue to see water coming out of this thermal relief valve, then you know it's bad and you need to either replace it or you need to plug it. Okay guys, so it just so happens I've got a client coming in Monday for, we're going to be doing a build. They're coming in from Alabama, bringing an enclosed trailer. And so we're going to be building his rig out, and at the same time, they're going to be doing training Monday and Tuesday. Today is Saturday, and so Monday and Tuesday they'll be here. My crew will be building the rig out while I'm out training them Monday and Tuesday, along with some other guys that are coming in. It's kind of a special training I did to work around the schedule for the folks that are getting the rig built, and also our normal monthly schedule classes were pretty booked up, so I had to add another one. But anyway, this is the machine that we're getting ready for that build, so it's a good opportunity for me to show you how we're going to set everything up in order for him to bypass, because this will be hooked to a buffer tank in the enclosed trailer. So the first thing that I'm going to do, because like I just told you, I don't use the coupler as a lead fitting in any of the machines that we sell, or rigs that we, well, not machines we sell, but the rigs that we build and hook up for trucks or trailers or whatever. I always take this fitting off and do it how I do it. Leave them with the fitting if they want to change it back or whatever, but I just kind of set up everybody the way I do things. That's generally how they want it. So anyway, on the back of the unloader here, you're going to put a crescent wrench on this, because if you don't and you start turning this whole unloader piece can turn. So you want to put, there's a little nut back here, and then just take this off. I'd already loosened it, so and then we'll just put our plug in. Now I'll tape this and put the lock seal on it later, but I'm just doing this for video purposes so you can see. But you would want to Teflon tape, put a little lock seal on it, tighten it down, and so that's how it looks when I do it. Next, we'll come back and we'll show you how we take care of this piece. Okay, so what we're doing next is we're removing the actual bypass hose that's going from the unloader down to the water inlet. The top part, just so you know, on this one uses an 11/16 wrench on the top. Down on the bottom, it's a 9/16. And so we're just going to remove that hose. And so it'll look like that. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove that, and I'll be right back in a minute. Okay guys, so next I want to deal with the water inlet, but first I'm going to go ahead and get this taped up. Now when you take these fittings off from factory, if you change anything here, they use permanent lock stuff, permanent lock seal, or much stronger lock seal. So when you take them off, you want to make sure that you clean anything that you see out in there. Sometimes the little shavings fall apart from the lock seal. I put a vacuum on these, vacuum cleaner, and sucked out what I could, because you just don't want any of those little bits and pieces getting into the pump when you start using your machine. So make sure those ports are completely cleaned out, vacuum them out, whatever you got to do. So I'm going to go ahead and put the plug on. I'm probably going to wish I had waited to do this, but we'll see. So that's the plug fitting that's going to hook the pressure washing hose up to the machine. See what I mean by that? Unloader will twist if you don't hold your wrench on it. All right, so next, I've already loosened the water inlet up, but remember I was telling you that if you wanted to use this, you could use this and just hook up, garden hose to this off of your tank if you wanted to. you would just need a 1/4-inch plug like this. It's a 1/4-inch hex plug. You can get them at Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, whatever. Anything that's going to plug this 1/4-inch hole that's on the side of this. And so that's what you would do. Just tighten it on down, and that will plug that off. And then you can still use your garden hose. But I'm taking this off, and what we're going to do is put a hose barb on here, and you could use 3/4, you could use 5/8, whatever you wanted to. If you wanted to run garden hose and you're using 5/8 garden hose, then off of your tank, then you could use this size fitting. So it's a 1/2 inch threaded to 5/8 barb is what they would call it. We're going to go 3/4. Actually, I think it's 3/4 here to 5/8 or whatever. So I'm gonna use 3/4 inch hose just so it gets good water volume. So I'm gonna tape this up. If anybody thinks I'm taping wrong, that's okay. You're free to say it. It's worked for me for years. So put a little lock seal on it, and then we're gonna put that on there. And so now our inlet for our water is all set. Just going to kind of snug this down. And I don't, tighten these full, put all my muscle behind it or whatever, because you just want to be careful. You never know when you could crack metal or plastic or whatever. So just nice and snug is all you need. Let the lock seal and the Teflon tape do its job. You don't want it loose, but you just want it nice and snug. So that's your water inlet. And then this is the outlet, which is going to go to the pressure hose, which will be like this. Okay? Because to me, like I said, plug points the way of the water. And so the plug is on the end of my pressure washing hose. Then I can hook my gun up to it, because the bottom of the gun will have the socket on it. And I want to show you that in a little bit. We'll go over that. So this is pretty much set. Now I'm going to show you how to set up the bypass to the tank so it recirculates the water. Okay guys, so next what I'm going to do is hook up or install my hose barb for the bypass hose, and this is a 3/8 threaded hose barb, 3/8 thread by 1/2 inch hose barb. So I'm going to run 1/2 inch hose on this for the bypass. So what I'm doing right now is putting the Teflon tape and the lock seal on, and so that's just going to go in right here. And then kind of tighten that down. Try to make your Teflon tape look pretty. I don't really care if it looks pretty or not, as long as it works. Of course, with me installing this stuff, Edwin, my installer, on Monday, once we fire everything up, he'll probably have to go back and redo this. So anyway, so that's the bypass hose barb, and then a piece of 1/2 inch poly braid hose is what I use. You're going to put this on there, slide it all the way on, and then slide your hose clamp up and tighten it down. I'm not going to do it all right now, but that's basically how it's going to look coming off of the machine. And so you can use a 90 depending on how your machine is going to fit and where your tank is located. You may have to use a 90 and go down, or a 90 and go up. I know how this machine is going to be situated, so this will run like this and straight down underneath the machine. But you could use a 90 if you need to. Just depends on the accessibility of your machine to your tank and making it run nice and even so it doesn't kink. I wouldn't want to use a straight if it was going to go back off that way. I would probably want to use a 90 and come down and go that way. But all of these type of hose barbs you can get on our site, but I always tell people it's best just to kind of get these little fittings at Home Depot or Lowe's. Once you get your machine figure up everything you need, and then you can go there and get all that kind of stuff. Sometimes it makes it easier, but if you want to buy them from us, that's fine too. So that's the bypass. Now we'll go to the tank. So just to kind of summarize, we've installed our water inlet fitting, which is the hose barb, which we're going to have this going down to the bottom of the tank because the tank's going to gravity feed this machine. Then we put our plug coming off of the unloader, and that's where we're going to hook our pressure hose to. And then this is the hose coming off the unloader on this side where it will go to the tank to a separate bulkhead fitting for the bypass. So now as the water comes through, it recirculates when you are off the trigger, and you don't have to worry about pulling that trigger every 20 to 30 seconds to let the water not get heated up, because if you don't do that, it can cause damage to seals and things of that nature inside the pump because the water can heat up. Again, that's what the thermal relief valve over here is for. Once you have the bypass hooked up, if you want, you can remove this, plug it, or you can just leave it, and it should never go bad because the water's not going to heat up because it continually circulates through the pump. Okay, so next we'll go over to the tank and show you how we get it plumbed up so you can get this hooked up and cleaning and making bank. Okay guys, so next we're going to do the tank. So we're going to hook up our bulkhead fittings in our tank, and I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to need a hole saw like this. It's probably best, like I always said, just to get a whole set of hole saws at Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever. You'll need a drill. Very simple, easy process to do. I'm going to show you how you can do it even by yourself. Don't necessarily have to have two people doing it. But here's the tank that we'll be using. These are 80-gallon vertical space-saving tanks. These are what I use on all of my trailers. Well, except for my big commercial rig. It's got a 425, but my truck rig that's got the skid on it, as well as the other trailer that we have for residential and light commercial. These are the 80-gallon tanks that I use. We sell these here. I don't have them on a website yet, but if you need them, I can get them for you. Found out about these probably a year and a half or so ago, and now I see a lot of guys are using them, which is really cool. They're really, I like them better than those vertical 55-gallon ones because they stand better. They're a little bit thicker wall too, so you have less chances of, them splitting from the bulging or whatever. But there is a band that goes around these. We have two different types. One is an actual stand that you can kind of put the tank into, and has aluminum straps that run around it. We got a local guy I just found that's going to make those for us. Shout out to Tyler Champagne, a customer that helped me find him. And then, but there's also a metal band that you can put around it, which will help to control the bulging as well. So let's get to the bulkhead fittings for the water supply as well as the bypass hose. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is drill the hole for the water feed to the pressure washer. And so, like I said, you're going to need a hole saw like this. I'm using a 3/4 inch bulkhead. These come in various sizes depending on what you need: 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 1.5 inch, whatever. For this 5-gallon per minute machine, I'm going to be using a 3/4 inch bulkhead. You want to make sure you use the right hole saw, which is this. And what I like to do is always just kind of put it over. I want to make sure it just kind of barely covers the threads. That's telling me that the hole is going to be big enough to get that part through the hole. If you were to use something like this, of course, you can tell that's way too big. It's going to leak. And then if you have something like this, which is a little bit smaller, you can see it's not quite covering and not quite going over the thread, so it wouldn't be big enough. So that's kind of just how I test to make sure I've got the right size. Gonna put it over like that. So we're gonna put that into our drill. Hold the top of the tank just kind of brace it. I want to put this kind of right in the middle. I don't want to get it too low to where I cut into the seam at the bottom. So I'm going to drill pretty much right in the middle. Okay guys, so if you're by yourself and you're trying to install the bulkhead down on the bottom after you drilled the hole, it's very easy to do. All you really need is, I use one of these little picker-upper things that you can get anywhere, Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, grocery store, whatever. So that's really all you need. I throw one end of the string down into the tank, and then I use a little grabber to go down inside the tank and grab the end of the rope, and then I just kind of leave enough slack on the end of the grabber to where I can push it through that little hole. So I want the little string coming out of that hole. You can see it right there. Then, so once I've got the string through the bottom hole where the bulkhead's going to come out of, I take the long end, this end here, and you have the thicker gasket that's on the bulkhead fitting. So these bulkhead fittings come with two different size gaskets, and so the one that's the thickest, just remember, always goes inside the tank because that's going to seal it off and prevent it from leaking. The smaller one's going to go on the outside. So I take the bulkhead fitting with the thicker seal here. That's a little gasket right there. Okay, so that's a thick gasket right there. And what I want to do is insert my string into the threaded long end, because what I'm doing is visualizing how this is going to be in the tank and how I'm going to thread, once I get it through the hole, the coupling onto here. And then all you got to do is just tie this off on something so that you can, it's good and tight. That way you can put a little tension. I'll show you in a second. So once I do that, I kind of just let that go down and drop into the bottom of the tank. Okay, so once I've dropped the bulkhead fitting down inside the tank, I just come over here and get my string and just kind of pull it, and that'll come right through your hole. And then what I do is take the little gasket. So the little gasket goes first, and then I take the coupling, the little nut, and to make sure the writing's on the outside that tells you whether to tighten or loosen, and just kind of pull that up to there, get the gasket on, and sometimes you kind of have to hold it back there or through the middle of it. And then you can get the nut threaded on if you can remember which way it goes. And that's how you get the bottom bulkhead installed by yourself. Go back up, unloosen your string, pull your string through. Okay guys, so next I'm going to install the bulkhead fitting for the actual bypass hose that's coming off the machine. And so you remember on the bottom of this tank we put a 3/4 inch fitting, so we use that hole saw. Now we're going to go to a 1/2 inch because we're using 1/2 inch hose for the bypass. And so as you can see, if I put this in, there's just a little bit too much play. So that's the wrong size hole saw that I want to use. I want to use the smaller one so that when the threaded end goes in, there's not a whole lot of play. You can just kind of barely move it. So the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put the bypass hose on the opposite side of where the feed hose is. That way when the bypass is coming in, if this tank is getting low on water, it's not going to cause turbulence over on this side where the water is going out and cause you to get air gaps into your machine, which could cause it to kind of like sputter or make it feel like maybe the seals are bad or you've got a water leak or air leak or whatever. So we're going to put the water bypass to the machine as well as the water inlet, both on the same side but opposite of the water side that's going out to the machine. So the bulkhead fitting is down here on this side of the tank, and so we're going to put the water inlet bulkheads as well as the bypass on this side. And so again, simply going to drill a hole for a 1/2 inch bulkhead fitting. Okay, so one of the things that I do when I'm drilling a lot of holes like this for a build in a tank, I just drill and let the shavings fall in. I'm going to take my wet vac with the long extensions and go in there and vacuum all those shavings out once I'm done, because you don't want those to get into your water, or if it's a bleach tank, you don't want to get it in your bleach and get it sucked into your pump. So again, the threaded portion with the thick gasket is going to go on the inside. So I'm just going to take my hand, put it up in like this. I'm going to take the smaller gasket, put it on like that. Then I'm going to take the wing nut, screw it all the way down. And now the bulkhead fitting for the bypass is installed. And so now we'll hook up the barb and the hose. So another piece to the plumbing puzzle is getting water to the tank. And so the way we do that is we have another hole that's cut into the top of the tank. I had mentioned that earlier when I was talking about hooking up the bypass. And so basically, I'm going to show you what it looks like outside of the tank, how it's put together, and then I'll show you installing it inside the tank. But basically, you have the float valve like this. There's usually a little strainer like this inside, and I always take those out because they'll get clogged. And I'll let you know right off the bat, these things are temperamental, so you have to be careful with them, installing them. Make sure you don't thread the threads down too much. You just don't want them real tight, just kind of snug. So this is a 1-inch adapter that you're going to put in first, and then that is going to connect on the inside of the tank to the bottom of your bulkhead fitting. This is a 1-inch bulkhead fitting. That's a 1-inch bushing connector piece, PVC, not PVC, poly, 1-inch bushing. And then on the top, coming out of the tank, will be the threaded part. And so it'll look kind of like this. Pretend my fingers are the top of the tank. So this threads on the top and secures it, and so that kind of holds it in place. And then off the top, I have a 1-inch to 3/4 inch 90. So it's 1-inch thread, 3/4 inch barb. And so what I do is run this barb, will have 3/4 hose that runs to my hose reel. And so that's the hose reel that will have the garden hose on it. So when you reel your garden hose off, hook it up to the water, turn the water on, water comes down the line, it goes through this and it drops. The water starts filling from down here. It'll start filling your tank up, and on the bottom of this, as it gets full, this float will stop the water. So when the water gets up to this point and trips this float, it'll stop the water from coming in. Then as you start pressure washing or using the water starts going down past the float. The float re-engages down and it starts filling water back up. So that's why we always say it's important, as soon as you get to the job, to hook your garden hose up first, get the tank filling while you're setting everything else up, because the water tank will fill, it'll shut off automatically, and then once you're done with all that, you can start cleaning. As you start cleaning, it'll start dropping and start replenishing the water source. Another good thing to have a spare backup on the truck, because sometimes these will fail. They'll stop. There's no warranty on them because you're putting water through them, and that's a plumbing piece and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a good idea to have an extra one, because you can just reach in through the cap of the tank, and you can easily unscrew it and screw another one back on. So what I've got here now is the float valve, and I've got my little 1-inch poly bushing that brings it up out of the float valve, and then I've got attached to it the 1-inch bulkhead. And so I'm going to try to go down inside the tank without dropping this, and then come up through the hole here like this. And remember, on the inside of the tank is the part of the bulkhead that has the thick gasket on it. So then I'm going to take the smaller gasket, put it on top, and then I'm going to take this and I'm going to tighten this down. All the way down, and now that is secure. And then you take your 90 and screw it into the top, and then you're ready to attach your hose to this barb and run it over to your hose reel. Okay guys, so as we're talking about the lead fitting, and again, there's a video I've got talking about fittings. I think it's pressure washer fittings explained or whatever. We'll put it in the card above or put it down in the video description below. Always a good idea to read that video description below, because you get a lot of, there's some links there from stuff I get from Amazon, some links to other things that may be helpful for you. But when we talk about the lead fitting coming off the machine, I told you that I liked to have the plug coming off of it because that's the way I was taught. Basically, I was taught that the plug points the way of the water flow, so the water always comes out through the plug. And so if this is my lead fitting off of the machine, then you're going to have the coupler on your hose. That's going to plug into the plug. If you're using the coupler like most manufacturers send them, then of course you're going to have the opposite end, and then that means the plug end of your hose is going to plug in here. And so that means you've got the coupler end on the end of your hose, as opposed to the way I do it, you've got the plug end pointing the way of the water. So you either got water coming out the plug or you got water coming out the coupler. So the reason I do that is because we use a ball valve setup, and I'll show you a picture of that. And so I like to spray, or when I'm using the ball valve to like downstream or rinse something, I want the water coming out of the plug. I just seem to get better flow out of that way and can kind of control my stream and my pressure. And I don't risk blowing the little O-ring out that's in the coupler if my water is coming through that. So, but the reason a lot of guys like to have the coupler on the end, and I get it, is because when they're attaching their gun, it's much easier to do it like that as opposed to the way I do it. Sometimes it takes two hands and have to pull this up and then force that in there. It's just a little bit harder, but it's not that much harder. And so that's the reason, most of the reason why most guys like to use this coupler on the end of their hose, because it's so much easier to connect the gun. And also this fitting here on the gun, which these wear out, you know, whatever's on the end of the gun here is going to wear out quicker. These are much cheaper to replace than the couplers are. So again, it just becomes a personal preference thing. I like the plug to point the way of the water. That's the way I was taught. If you like to do it with the coupler pointing the way of the water, that's okay. Either way it's going to work. However you want to do it, that's fine. But that's what I mean when you talk about the lead fitting. You've got one or two fittings, one or two choices. You can either have the coupler coming off the machine, or you can have the plug coming off the machine. So however you do that, that just means everything after that has to be set to receive whichever fitting is going to be on the end of your hose. One thing I would always suggest anytime you get new fittings, number one, you need to have a dental pick set like this, and the O-rings that usually come in these are black. They're like this. They're not very good. They don't hold up, especially under heat. So you can either replace those with a Viton, which is what I usually always do, or you can just ride with it, and then once it starts leaking or goes bad, then you can replace it with the good O-rings. That's up to you, but having a dental pick set and making sure that you replace these O-rings when they need to be done is key. So have a dental set kit, and then a set of 3/8 O-rings, and then a set of 1/4 inch O-rings. So which one goes where? As I've stated before, anything from the gun, bottom of the gun, back to the machine is going to be 3/8 fittings. Anything from the top of the gun forward is going to be 1/4 inch. So your nozzles are 1/4 inch, this fitting's 1/4 inch, your wand is 1/4 inch, all of that. But everything from the bottom of the gun back, including the bottom of the gun, is 3/8 fittings. So that's how you know what size and where you need to use what size. So you've either got 3/8 or you've got 1/4 inch. So that basically explains what I was talking about, the lead fitting and the choices that you have, and kind of takes care of the reasons and the ways that people make their choices. So I decided to go ahead and talk about the ball valve and show you the setup. This is a ball valve setup that we sell at DougRuckerStore.com, and so this is the coupler that comes off the back end of it. Then you've got your Mossmatic hose swivel, which helps to keep the hose from getting twisted all up and helps for hose management. And then off the end of mine, I've got the plug. So when I spray using this or hook up to a surface cleaner or a gun or a wand, I am, let's do this real quick. Mine is going to be like this if I'm using a gun. So that's kind of what it's going to look like. And then my hose is going to hook up like this. All right. And so that's kind of how the setup looks. And this swivel allows the hose to kind of turn as you walk around the house or pull the hose or whatever, and it's not getting all twisted up or whatever. So if you're doing the lead fitting as the coupler, and I hope I'm not making this so confusing, then you're basically going to have switch these, and this is why we have it on the website. When you order one of these, if you want the socket out or the plug out, that's saying that's the direction the water's going to flow. So the water now on this is going to come through here and out here and into your gun. So that's how the ball valve set up. And so that's how knowing everything, knowing how you set up your lead fitting is just very important, because your downstream injector, the arrow on it has to point the proper direction, all of that. So every, your surface cleaners, everything has to be set up to receive the proper fitting and connect the proper way. So hope that helps you guys understand that a little bit better. Okay guys, so once you've got all your plumbing set up and you've got everything set the way you want it, it's time to oil her up and gas her up and get to making some money. And so you've got two different types of oils you got to have. One is for the pump oil and then a different oil for the engine. And so I recommend these high performance lubricants. These are the ones that I use in all of my machines. As a matter of fact, I use these for our truck vehicles and personal vehicles too. They're probably the best oils out there. I know there's a lot of people will tell you it doesn't matter what oil you use, but I have discovered that it does, because our machines and trucks and cars and everything operate and run much better and much smoother using these oils. And we make less frequent oil changes using these, so it saves us money in the long run. You do spend a few dollars more for these oils versus the store-bought at, auto part stores or whatever. But anyway, there's one here called Compressor Life 100. That would be for the pump oil. And then you've got SAE 5W30 oil, which would be for the motor. And so you can get those off of our website if you'd like to. This pump comes, it already has oil in it. There's a sight glass here. You always want your oil to be halfway up that sight glass before you get started. So you always want to make sure you check that. Sometimes they come with oil in the engine, sometimes they don't. So you always want to check that before you start it up. Refer to your owner's manual about how much oil you put in to the engine oil crankcase so you don't overfill it. But I highly recommend you getting these oils. They're the best out there. They're on our website. You might as well grab a few of them so that you have them in your shop and save some money on shipping and get a few of them at a time. But if you want to go with the cheap stuff, you can do that too. So one other thing that I wanted to tell you is on these machines like this that have, you've got your choke here and you've got your gas shut off here. So I've done this, showed this in a couple of videos before, but when I'm running the machine and I'm getting ready to be done for the day or done for a job and would leave to head for another job, I lay my hose down, my pressure hose down. I continue to let the water run through it, usually just through an open ball valve. And I turn the machine off at the gas. I don't turn it off by the switch here, okay? I just turn the gas off to it and I let the carburetor run out of gas. This will save you in the long run. It'll help prevent any type of issues when you go to start the machine. Sometimes if gas is left in these carburetors, it'll get really hard to pull and hard to start. So anytime I have a machine that has a fuel shut off right here, I try to shut those off just using the fuel on and off. And then, of course, when I get ready to start the next day, I turn the fuel on, turn the choke, one pull, that baby starts. So hope this has helped you guys. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Be sure to leave a question, subscribe, hit that bell notification, give me a like, share it out, all that kind of stuff. Thank you so much for watching, and y'all have an awesome, blessed day. And of course my drill dies. Hold on, let me go get another battery.